be about estrogen dominance. And if it's not affecting you, if you're willing to listen, it'll still be beneficial. You probably know somebody who has these issues, and it's good information if you know any family member who's dealing with it. Lots and lots of women are dealing with it. Estrogen is one of those things, right? Like it kind of gets a bad name because it is one of our master fat storing hormones, but it's responsible for so much. It's necessary for curves in a woman, mood, fertility. It's made in the ovaries, made in fat tissue, the liver, and the adrenals. When it becomes dominant in a person, poses a problem. Just women, but men as well. Things that we need to know in advance is we are having so many of these hormone dominant type of issues develop today. Cancer is one of them. 1 in 8 women will develop breast cancer. A lot of it is linked to estrogen dominance. The thing that I really would like for you to understand, though, as I go into this, that we think in terms of hormone problems, but hormones are not the problem. Hormones are chemical messengers, is what they are. There's always going to be something deeper that's the root cause of these, what the doctors will call hormone problems. Hormones just don't decide to do things on their own. They're just messengers. And so we need to look at these deeper issues. The causes of estrogen dominance, which is epidemic in our society today. The things that I'll discuss about is going to be poor liver detoxification, something called gut dysbiosis. Constipation plays a major role, believe it or not. Chronic stress and inflammation. Stealth infections, things like old root canals, believe it or not. Mitochondrial dysfunction, which is generally marked in a person with low energy. They have a mitochondrial issue, or they won't be able to burn fat. They can't lose weight effectively. Those are the two major markers, if you will, of people who have mitochondria, which are your energy factories. They have mitochondrial dysfunction. Other things that cause estrogen dominance is going to be what we call endocrine disruptors. That's going to be plastic chemicals like BPA, phthalates, dioxins, flame retardants, and then alcohol and a bad diet. We can't talk about any of this stuff without talking about the diet. Alcohol in particular can convert 2-OH, which is a good estrogen, into 4-OH, which is a bad estrogen, responsible for a lot of cancer. What are the symptoms of estrogen dominance? Well, premenstrual mood changes, painful lumpy breasts, insomnia, premenstrual headaches, migraine type headaches. My wife had that when I first met her. Every time of the month, she'd have to go into a dark room and close the door, and she'd have this horrible headache, and then she would throw up, and then the headache would go away, but it was an all-day ordeal. Didn't know at the time what was happening, but I do now. Anxiety, infertility, miscarriages, especially when combined with low progesterone, will cause miscarriages. And then everyone's favorite, unexplained weight gain, right? So there's 2 primary estrogens that we need to know about. One is called estrone, estrone, it's E1. E2 is called estradiol. They undergo hydroxylation, where an OH oxygen hydrogen group is attached to the estrogen. Now there's 3 that we really need to know about. The first one is 2-OH. That's considered to be your good estrogen. It's your safest estrogen. And that should comprise about 60 to 80% of a woman's estrogen levels. 4-OH, which is primarily induced by man-made petrochemicals, drugs, bad oils, plastics, pesticides, household chemicals, things like that. That should comprise about 7 to 11%. Many women have a much higher amount of that in their body. 4-OH, it's considered toxic estrogen. And then 16-OH, which is not a good estrogen, but it's not as dangerous because it is bound to a protein, which kind of inactivates it. That should comprise 13 to 30% of the estrogen. Now, 4-OH, that's the bad one, right? It needs to be deactivated, and it's deactivated by something called methylation. If you heard me talk about the 5 R's of cellular healing. R number 5 is reestablishing methylation. Most of the people that we see, they come to us under methylated. They've lost the ability to methylate. They have a deficiency of methyl groups. A methyl group is a carbon combined with 3 hydrogens. And then your body uses those to be able to do different things like detoxify, like make energy, like heal, and also get rid of bad estrogen. And you've heard me talk about my friend Dan Papa, who I was in practice with, the guy on the webinar who got sick, right? Way back when you first heard me. Well, his wife, Marilee, her mom had breast cancer. She supposedly got over that. And then, I mean, they said the treatment was successful, which, from that perspective, you can say it was. But he told her at the time, her name was Joyce. Joyce, if you don't address why you got breast cancer, it can come back as something else. And almost 10 years to the day, it came back as uterine cancer. Shortly after that, 2 months after that, she died. So she had issues. They found out after the fact that her daughter, Marilee, had high levels of lead, Dan's wife. She wound up passing that lead down to her children. And this was all verified via testing. Marilee had a ton of problems, just like her mom did when she was Marilee's age. And Marilee was heading down the same path. And Dan did the test on her, found out she had high levels of lead, couldn't get rid of it. She wasn't methylating. And so the same thing not only applies to estrogen, but it applies to toxins. We can't detoxify. And remember, this 4-OH is toxic estrogen. So we need to be able to detoxify. We need to be able to methylate. We have to have sufficient carbon hydrogen groups to do that. One of the things that we can do is change our diet, making sure that we're eating things like raw carrots, like raw celery, cumin, anise, coriander, broccoli. Another good thing is glutathione, that supplement that you all have taken called G-Cell. It's a superior product. It is glutathione that not only get past the gut, most glutathione products don't, but the G-Cell that you utilized was formulated to be able to make it past the gut, not being damaged, and then get into the cell. A lot of the products out there, they won't raise intracellular glutathione, which we need. Glutathione helps push out toxins out of the cells. It's an antioxidant. So that's something that is also important to deactivate this toxic estrogen. And then, or to methylate rather, and then N-acetylcysteine. It's generally, you'll just see it as NAC, N-acetylcysteine. Cruciferous vegetables are important. B vitamins are important to methylate. Magnesium, very important. Most Americans are magnesium deficient. 2 B vitamins in particular, one called methylfolate. You can buy folate, but you want to get methylfolate. It's already methylated. And you want to get methylated B12, which is methylcobalamin, methyl B12. So you want to, if you're getting those 2, folate and B12, look for the methylated version of them. And then there's something called fulvates. Fulvates are actually in the product called Bind that you took. It's not just activated charcoal. There are these fulvates, which are really just minerals that can help do a bunch of good things, but they help to make your cell membranes more receptive to their nutrients. So it's really important there, but it also helps to deactivate the estrogen by increasing methylation. So it's important. Okay, what else needs to be in good shape for us to be able to deactivate these toxic estrogens and not really convert over from good estrogen to bad estrogen? Well, we have to have a healthy microbiome. Most people that we see have gut dysbiosis. That's where your microbiome has changed. You have too many bad bacteria, not enough good bacteria. The ratio, the relationship between the good and the bad has become distorted. And that happens because, why? Well, because we consume things that are designed to kill living things, including bacteria. Chlorine in our water, pesticides and herbicides in our food, right? And then all of the antibacterial soap that some of you probably used in the last year, antibiotics in our food and antibiotics that we take prescription wise. We know that one bout of antibiotics can wipe out 30% of our good bacteria. And so now that we become a breeding ground for bad bacteria. They take over and we create that distortion. But when we have too many of these bad bacteria, they produce something called beta glucuronidase. And that is a substance that it's again made by the bad bacteria in the gut when we have an unhealthy gut, but it creates unbound estrogen. Remember I said that 1,16-OH is not as dangerous because it's bound to a protein. Well, this beta glucuronidase made by the bad bacteria that overproliferate in somebody who has gut dysbiosis, it creates unbound estrogens, which can then enter the bloodstream, and it creates this overabundance, this estrogen dominance, and we see all of these problems that go along with it, like endometriosis, like PCOS, like obesity and metabolic syndrome. What's metabolic syndrome? When your sugar levels are elevating, your cholesterol levels, your blood pressure is going up, your weight's going up, those four things comprise metabolic syndrome, epidemic numbers in our society. It also creates cognitive dysfunction. How many people are dealing with cognitive dysfunction? Epidemic numbers, right? Alzheimer's wasn't even around that long ago. And now it's like a leading, rising faster than everything, maybe outside of autism. And then even cardiovascular disease, like we see a lot of women who are put on estrogen replacement, right? And what is the fear? Heart disease is one of the things, and along with cancer, when they're taking estrogen in medication, as a medication. Okay, so more things to talk about as it relates to the unhealthy gut, and that is constipation. Constipation is a big, big problem. I mean, we see people all the time, and they're like, they go to the bathroom, they have a bowel movement like too infrequently. When that happens, they're not going to eliminate estrogen. One of the ways estrogen is eliminated is whenever we have a bowel movement. Well, when it's not eliminated, it can become reactivated. Even if it was deactivated, it can become reactivated and go back into the body again. Not to mention the fact that when we are not going to the bathroom, we're sending toxins back into the body again as well. Another big thing is that we have to ensure that we get our bile flowing. This is an issue with some people who they don't have enough bile because they don't have a gallbladder, right? Like God put in spare parts, but he didn't. And so we're missing those parts a lot of times, and that's going to create an issue. And in this case, we need to make sure that we have sufficient bile and it's flowing. It's very, very important. There are supplements that we can take that will help with making sure that our bile is moving through our body the way that it should. Yarrow, Yarrow, is one. The always dependable garlic and the equally dependable ginger. Jerusalem artichoke is another thing. What else you can do is have salads that are what we consider to be bitters, where you would have arugula salad or you would include kale in your salad. Those bitters will wind up creating more bile flow. There's a really, really impressive supplement called Tudka, Tudca. It stands for taro-urso-deoxycholic acid. You don't need to remember that. Tudka, Tudca. It increases bile flow by up to 250%. You can buy it online. It also improves bile quality and it improves the bile salts. And the other thing that Tudka can do is it helps the burning of fat and it also helps remove cellular debris. So it's a really cool supplement. Now, what is important also to know is that the more estrogen we have, right, as a typical lifestyle and all the things that we're doing and we're facing, we're releasing more of that estrogen back into the body. We're converting good estrogen into bad estrogen. You have to understand that the more estrogen we have, the more histamine we also have. And this is a problem with a lot of people. They have histamine issues. They have a lot of allergy type symptoms. And so understand that this is a vicious cycle. More estrogen, more histamine. But also, when you have more estrogen, you will lower the enzyme called DAO, that breaks histamine down. So you're not only producing more histamine when your estrogen levels are up, but you're also limiting this DAO enzyme. You're lowering that enzyme, which is needed to break histamine down. And now you wind up with a really vicious cycle. And this is where a lot of women are. They spend a lot of their time with increased estrogen and increased histamine. And it's a super vicious cycle. And it's a really crappy place to be. And we see a lot of women like that. So, how do we calm the histamine factor? Because this is part of it, right? They go hand in hand. One causes the other. Well, you want to address root cause infections, a major driver of histamine. People don't think about this or not told this, but latent infections in the body, things like old root canals that have created an infectious pocket where you're eating away at the bone in the jaw. We see that with people. Other toxicities in the body, like toxins in general, are going to play a major role in people who have this histamine issue. So we need to open up their drainage pathways, their liver, their kidney, their lymphatics, and their gut, their downstream pathways. Very important. Anybody who has estrogen, histamine issues, they have to have those downstream pathways open. So we need to focus on the liver. That's one of the downstream pathways. We need to focus on the gallbladder. We need to focus on gut health. That's another downstream pathway. Hippocrates, I always say, the father of modern medicine, said that he believed that all disease begins in the gut. I see so much relationship between disease and an unhealthy gut. We have to be concerned about the diet. We have to lower sugar. Sugar drives histamine. It also creates a lot of these hormonal issues because sugar will cause the cells to become inflamed. Now you can't utilize your hormones. They can't get in. There's a barrier with cellular inflammation. Not just sugar, but processed carbs. We consume too many carbs. We have to increase the amount of healthy fats. That's going to help calm a histamine problem for people. People who have a lot of allergies, my experience is that they generally don't eat enough fat, and they haven't done it for a long time. And it can take years, honestly. Sadly, it can take 2 or 3 years to consume enough healthy fat, animal fat, to be able to turn that situation around. You can take a DAO enzyme supplement. You can find that on Amazon. But you can do more of a histamine cocktail, if you will. 4 things: quercetin, N-acetylcysteine, that NAC, vitamin C, and stinging nettles. It's quercetin, NAC, vitamin C, and stinging nettles. You can take just the minimal dosage to start with on the bottle, and then just try to increase the dosage 2 or 3 times what they're recommending minimally. But I'd start with the minimal and see how it helps you. But that cocktail is really anti-inflammatory, and it will help suppress histamine in the body naturally. We can't talk about this without talking a little bit more about toxins. I talked about endocrine disruptors, right? A lot of them are going to be plastic, BPA, phthalates, things like that. Pesticides are another thing. Another name for these they're called xenoestrogens. They mimic estrogen in the body, and they are hormone disruptors. And again, they're called obesogens, another name that scientists refer to them as, because they're mimicking estrogen. Estrogen is one of your master fat storing hormones. That's why you women have more body fat in general than men, right? Estrogen is playing a role in that. But we're driving this in spades whenever we're consuming these toxic, estrogen mimickers, if you will, that are in these chemicals. The thing about them is that they are fat soluble. It's important to know this. When they get in the body, they search out fat and they hide themselves in fat. And where's the largest concentration of fat in our body? Anybody know? It's our cell membranes. Bilipid layer, it's called. It's the largest concentration of fat in the body. And what we're seeing is that it's creating chronic inflammation. It's creating hormone resistance. But another thing that we believe is happening is that it's making us fat because our body is trying to contain. This is a recent theory, I think, that's being borne out with research. But we're so contaminated with these xenoestrogens and other toxins that are fat soluble that our body is laying down. We become a fat building machine, a fat storing machine. because our body is like, we have all of these toxins, we've got to contain them. The body puts down more fat to trap these toxins so that they're not circulating around the body. But even still, they're creating inflammation in the body. It's just so important that we are detoxifying from a cellular level, that we're getting these things out of us and that we're aware of what we're putting into us. So many of the beauty products, girls, they're plastic chemicals, BPAs and phthalates, and you're putting them on your skin, some of you still maybe. And your skin is your largest organ, and that stuff goes right into the core of your being. And I always talk about this environmental working group study that looked at American women. 12 different toxins they're exposed to on average, with 168 different, I said 12 different toxins, 12 different beauty products exposing these women to 168 different toxins. That's crazy. That's one thing. That's not the cleaning products and all of the air we breathe, water, you get all of that, the foods we're eating. These things are everywhere. How do we get rid of these xenoestrogens? What are some ways that we can get rid of them? Well, the good news is that they do move out of the body pretty readily. That's a good thing. But the bad thing is we're so overexposed to them. It's considered that some of these plastic chemicals, the typical American is exposed, or I should say, retains 1,000 times more of these plastic chemicals than any other type of toxin. That's how endemic they are in our society. Plastic chemicals are everywhere. But the good news is they do move out readily if we stop putting them in our body. And we can assist that process with infrared sauna. It's a great thing. They have infrared saunas out there that are not that expensive. You can get them for your home now. Put them in your basement. They're really not that expensive compared to the benefit that you get from them. I think I bought one for my old office that we had. I think it cost me I want to say it was like $800, something like that. It's not cheap, but it lasts for many, many years and you get a lot of benefit out of an infrared sauna. Exercise is another thing that's free, right? So anything that causes you to sweat is going to help remove these fat soluble toxins. Losing weight will help remove fat soluble toxins because they're trapped in your fat, right? So that losing weight is going to be helpful. Epsom salt baths is another thing that you can do to help remove these these chemicals in our body. Enemas and colonics, for those of you that have never done that, coffee enemas really can be helpful. I've seen people save their lives with that type of stuff. For real. It's a great way to begin this, opening up the downstream pathways, right? Just getting this stuff moving out of us. You want to filter your water, including your shower. It's really important. If you have city water, you don't want to be consuming city water. You don't want to be putting that in your body to any great degree. And then obviously things like plastic bottles, they're everywhere. Like even with our babies, we put formula in a plastic bottle and we stick it in the microwave and then we heat it. If people knew what was happening, they wouldn't do that kind of stuff. When you heat a plastic bottle in a microwave, you are leaching a lot of plastic chemicals into that fluid. And then our babies are drinking that. And then we're seeing all of these issues. That's just one example. All of these young girls, like 8, 9 years old, that are starting to become a woman because they're so overloaded with these estrogens, these fake estrogens. You talk to any doctor that's been doing what they've been doing for a long time, and they'll tell you that they're seeing this trend downward where these young girls, developing breast tissue and beginning to have their periods and stuff because of the chemicals they're exposed to. And it starts in infancy. Okay, so as we wrap up here, a couple special herbs that I think you want to know about. One of them is called Cyperus rotundus herb, Cyperus, Cyperus rotundus herb. It's really cool. It helps modulate estrogen receptors in the body. It can be really helpful to reduce uterine fibroids, and research has showed that it can help decrease a woman's risk of developing ovarian cancer. It can also be used as a hormone replacement therapy. How many people, Felicia, do we have coming to us with hormone replacement, right? Even bioidentical, and they want to get off of that stuff. Well, if you're going to do that, this could be something that you could utilize, because what it does is it actually has biphasic activity on the estrogen receptors. In other words, it'll help mimic the phases of a woman's cycle naturally. You're not having to put artificial stuff into your body, these fake chemicals that generally are even not bioidentical so much, but with hormone replacement therapy. And there's a price to pay for that. That research shows that. Another one is going to be pine pollen. Probably a lot of you never heard of pine pollen, but it helps increase libido. It helps balance DHEA and testosterone in the body. We need a balance of these hormones. Most of the things that we see are really from an imbalance, right? So finally, we're seeing things like infertility is seriously rising due to things like these xenoestrogens, these chemicals that are mimicking hormones in our body. Men in the last 50 years have had a 50% drop in their sperm count. Like what is this spell for us as a species? Like I don't know how long we're going to be here, but man, it just the way that we're going, we're creating our own demise. Like 50% drop in sperm count in the last 50 years. Like where's that going? Like infertility in women, especially younger women, it's really rising rapidly. Don't forget that a lot of this is linked to that mitochondrial dysfunction. A lot of you that have low energy, a lot of you that can't lose weight, that's just not a nuisance. That's a sign that your energy factories they're on the fritz. And that is a cellular issue. And you've got to fix that, because that ultimately is going to lead to much more serious health problems beyond just being tired all the time and not being able to lose weight. It will create disease in your body. So it's imperative that we work on fixing that mitochondria, becoming a fat burner, being able to utilize fat for energy, which will help naturally to increase your energy output. Just last thing, remember what I said, that hormones are not a root cause. Hormones are not the problem. They're just chemical messengers. If they're out of balance, that's a problem, but it's not them doing that, right? There's some deeper issues that are going on that needs to be addressed. So much of it has to do with infections, has to do with a bad gut, a leaky gut, dysbiosis, all of the toxicities that I just was discussing, and then a bad diet. We cannot forget the diet. You're not going to get well unless you're willing to change your diet. That's what we tell people. Now, because of all the other things going on, the typical person's not going to get well if all they do is change their diet. They've got to address these other issues.